The Dark Knight has had a long roller coaster of a career in video games, ranging from absolute stinkers to some of the best comic book video games of all time. Recently, I decided to stream one of said stinkers, Batman Dark Tomorrow, on a whim, for I have an inexplicable desire to showcase my misery while I play licensed video games on my Twitch channel. It was my first time playing this game. I had heard all the stories of how terrible this game is, but I still wanted to experience the game for myself. And to my surprise, I didn't have an awful time with it. Don't get it twisted, I'm not gonna come out of the alleyways with some sort of hot take on how this game is secretly brilliant and you're all dumb. But I want to discuss some of the aspects of this game that I like, and how others could have been improved upon. Let's fix Batman Dark Tomorrow. The biggest praise I can give this game is that its story and cutscenes are pretty damn good. Like seriously, these cutscenes are genuinely well directed. I'm no cinema connoisseur, but look at this stuff. The lighting, cinematography, this isn't bad for a game that came out in 2003. The tone is right at home for a Batman story. Some of the character models are a little dopey looking, but Batman himself looks great. And his voice actor, Julian Fletcher, knocks it out of the park. I'd love to see him give it another go in an animated movie, or hell, maybe another video game.
Robin, I want you to stay here until the police arrive. Batgirl, I want you to do a sweep of the warehouse district. Make sure there are no rogue false facers running loose. I'll be in touch.
The story is by no means nothing extraordinary. It plays up a mystery that eventually leads to a big ploy set up by Ra's al Ghul, where he plans to cleanse the world by flooding it, taking out a third of the Earth's population.
Millions will die.
But those that remain will find themselves heir to a planet no longer in danger of poisoning itself.
Nothing groundbreaking, but there are some great moments along the way. And it feels like it could have been an episode of the animated show or a comic book miniseries. You've probably seen a lot of Let's Plays or gameplay clips showing this opening section of the game, set on the rooftops of Gotham City, where a lot of players fall to their deaths, or just hang there from Batman's bat grapple. So immediately, this game gives a pretty bad first impression. And the criticisms are totally justified. The game does a terrible job of communicating how you're supposed to traverse through these rooftops. But once I figured out that the bat grapple and bat rope were completely different, the grapple being for ascending and descending, and the rope being for swinging, I'll admit that I had a fun time swinging from rooftop to rooftop. There's a sense of weight and risk with each swing, due to the game having fixed camera angles, which many have criticized the game for. But I actually think that the fixed camera angles made swinging from rooftops more interesting. Each rooftop being a challenge where you have to make sure you position yourself on the best spot and correctly time when you let go of the rope. I never really found the camera angles to work against me. They were always positioned in such a way that made it clear which rooftop I was supposed to swing to. That and the added minimap on the corner highlighting my path never made traversing frustrating. If anything, I wish the game had more sections focused on platforming. Unfortunately, there aren't any more past this opening level. I'm used to Batman games making the use of his grappling hook a bit more automated, not really having much player involvement past aiming a reticule at a grapple point that will zip you over in the blink of an eye. And there's nothing wrong with that. It 100% nails how the bat grapple works. But it was nice having a version that added some stakes. I think having the bat rope and bat grapple just be one gadget with alternate firing modes would eliminate the confusion, streamline the grapple, keep the weighty feel. Combat is really shallow in Dark Tomorrow. It's functional in the sense that hitting bad guys is relatively easy and it's not littered with glitches or anything of that sort. Sometimes enemies will consistently block your attacks, so you try different combinations of punches and kicks and see what breaks through their defenses. Other times they'll just stand there not putting up much of a fight at all. It's inconsistent. There isn't a set of rules or system as to how the combat works in this game. It's just sort of there in its bare bones presentation. The most established feature it has going for it is that enemies have to be handcuffed after being knocked down or they will continue to get back up. This is cool. I always thought that seeing Batman carry around handcuffs adds to that noir detective tone that makes certain interpretations so interesting. But there's also a complicated conversation to have about Batman handcuffing bad guys. He's the poster boy for realistic superheroes / vigilantes, and this really grounds him in such a way that made me put down my controller for a minute. There's something about giving me, the player, the ability to handcuff bad guys as Batman in this Batman video game that makes me feel wrong. Is this whole crusade justified? I feel civilized handcuffing these criminals after stopping their evil doings, just as a police officer would. But at the same time, it's barbaric. Tying this person up on the cold pavement, entertaining this facade of this crazy person running around dressed like a bat, acting above the law. But does he think he's within the law? Just because he uses the tool a police officer would? Does that make it right? Anyway, this mechanic gets old pretty fast, especially after taking out a group of like 5 goons and waiting around for the handcuffing animation to play out for each one. But with a few kinks, this mechanic can work a little better. The biggest change I would make off the bat is doing away with pretty much all of combat, at least head-on combat. Now I know this sounds crazy, martial arts is a big part of Batman's character, but I get the feeling that at a certain point in this game's development, the team wanted to make a stealth game. You've got all the basics of a stealth game here. A minimap very reminiscent of the Soliton radar from Metal Gear Solid, representing level layout, player position, and enemies' cone of vision, a painfully slow stealth walk, silent takedowns, smoke pellets, enemies reacting to sounds. You'll even find little pockets within hallways that look like they're meant for Batsy to tuck away in and hide as an enemy patrols by. The problem is that enemy behavior, placement, and most levels weren't designed to accommodate for a stealth game. The way enemies react to noise is inconsistent and unfair. The suggestive cone of visions on the map are not at all representative of how far the enemies can see. And they're often placed in wide open spaces amongst other enemies that would make it impossible to take out stealthily. Reworking the levels with tighter spaces or even some verticality to make use of that back grapple, giving players the opportunity to skitter over patrol guards unsuspectedly. Also, having patrol patterns that the player can pick up on is really important. Having all guards be armed with automatic weapons would make sense as to why Batman has to take a stealth approach as much as he can. With the absence of head-on combat, I would put a greater emphasis on gadgets. Going back to the aforementioned handcuffs, you would have a limited amount of these, incentivizing the player to be smart about which guard to take out. Think of it as managing your ammunition in a classic Resident Evil game. Which brings me to my next point. Dark Tomorrow also creeps in some Resident Evil elements, the fixed camera angles being the most obvious. But you'll also find small instances of exploration and puzzle solving. Unfortunately, much like its stealth elements, these are not fully committed to. Which is a shame, because I think having a Resident Evil style Batman game set in Arkham Asylum with horror undertones, deep exploration, and encounters with Batman's rogues gallery in the form of unique boss fights and... Wait, am I just describing Batman Arkham Asylum? Yeah, fair enough. But when Dark Tomorrow had me backtracking to previous areas with a newfound key item, I couldn't help but think that the game could have benefited from a slower approach. Focus less on combat and more on taking in the environment and putting to use those detective skills Batman is so famous for. Most of Batman's utility belt in this game is useless. The universal tool is used for unlocking a couple of locked doors, smoke pellets barely function, the night vision goggles are used for one instance in the game, And this finger light serves no purpose but to do your best E.T. impression. Give me a section where all the lights in Arkham Asylum have gone out and I have to use this finger light. You can find documents in Arkham Asylum that flesh out the universe. But how about finding documents that would hint at a puzzle solution? Again, playing up the detective aspect of Batman. These puzzle elements could have also applied to the boss fights. There's a good variety of classic villains here, from Mr. Freeze to frickin' Ratcatcher. But they all come down to this. It's a mindless fight of pummeling the villain with your fists. How about instead of making these encounters a basic fight of trading fisticuffs, make them another form of a puzzle? Just before the boss fight against Poison Ivy, I pick up a defoliant. I thought for sure this would play into the fight, but all I had to do was punch the giant plant monster to death. I'm thinking of something along the lines of an adventure game, like Day of the Tentacle, where you have to apply the right item or interact with something in the environment while being strapped for time, forcing you to think fast and be observant at the same time, making these boss fights feel tense. The biggest problems Batman Dark Tomorrow has is poor communication and a lack of vision. It's one of those games that is a hodgepodge of different genres. Does it want to be a beat 'em up, a stealth game, a puzzle game, a platformer? It brings in too many elements and doesn't commit to perfecting any of them. Nowadays, many games get criticized for holding the player's hand every step of the way. But it's worse when a game throws you in without any sort of guidance. Luckily, playing these kinds of clunky games is my favorite pastime, so I didn't have too much of a hard time figuring it out. Batman Dark Tomorrow is far from a good game, but I've played a lot worse. And once again, I think if the team would have focused on delivering a focused stealth/puzzle game over anything else, there could have been something here. If anything, I recommend it for its cutscenes. If you do in fact play it, just be sure to complete the optional objective of disarming the missile in the last level, or you'll be treated to this slap in the face.